Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Considered by many to be the modern-day Peter Druker, Roger Martin is on the show today talking about strategy, shareholder value, and SWOTs. And feel free to stick around for the post-pod discussion with V and Mark.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Well, welcome to the show today, Roger. Thanks for coming to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
I've always enjoyed doing this, Mark. You know that.
Yeah. Well, so for anyone who doesn't know, Roger is a strategic advisor to companies like, P&G, Lego, Ford, companies that you might have heard before. Author of 12 books, I think it is now, and dozens of HBR articles covering topics that range from strategy to democratic capitalism to design of business, social innovation, and then integrative thinking. In 2017, Roger was ranked the #1 management thinker in the world on the Thinkers 50 list and have remained on the top 10 list, or as the top 10 or top 7, for the last 10 years. Formerly the dean of the Rotman School of Management at U of T, and the CEO of Ford. I saw a quote saying that you're the Peter Drucker of our generation.
That was very nice and very generous. And Adi Ignatius, the editor of HBR, has said that on several occasions, which always makes me happy because he is my managerial thinking hero for sure.
Yeah, and you are mine, so this is really exciting.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
But it relates to what you said earlier about writing about a lot of things. One thing I like about Drucker is he wasn't known for kind of one thing. He wrote 39 books across a variety of subjects in management, and in some sense, I have tried to mirror that and not just write about kind of one thing. I mean, probably people think I write more about strategy than anything else, but I like to write about how managers need to think very holistically about the task, how their company fits in their industry, how their company contributes to society, all of those things. And I've taken my lead in some sense from Peter Drucker, who also wrote about all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it fits well with V and I in terms of I know he and I have worked together for a number of years. We've been friends for a long time, and we'll go on bike rides and just natter about yes, we're in marketing, but it's not just the marketing thing that we're trying to fix. It's like the system that we're trying to understand and figure out where the levers are. Because, to your point, I don't think decision-making, as an example, or strategy, it only applies to one particular field. Like, it has impact across all fields. So trying to figure out the dots that connect them all is really important.
Yes. And there's many dots to connect, right? It's not like there's just a few things to figure out in the world of business. There are many, and the world of business kind of needs to do better. The world of business. I mean, and this was the philosophy. The thing I did early in my career is with a bunch of other crazy kids. Built this company called Monitor Company, and our view of the world was corporations are owning huge tracts now of the world's most important kind of assets, whether they're raw materials, financial assets, human assets. And if we can help them turn those into goods and services that make the world a better place in a better way, right, then we will have done a good thing for the world. So that was the motivation for creating Monitor in the good old days. And I still feel that same way. I mean, corporations have not gotten smaller. They've not gotten again fewer of the world's resources at their disposal. They've gotten bigger and had more, and they've got to do better in my view.
Yeah. Well, I've seen stuff like even the GDP of Apple is bigger than however many countries there are in the world. Like, I mean, these companies are massive, massive, massive organizations that generate tons of value. Let's call it wealth, maybe value,
Mm-hmm.
um, but demand so many resources as well from all
Yeah.
kinds of people.
Yeah. And create all sorts of negative externalities if they're not careful, like lots of pollution. They can treat their employees badly and make their lives difficult and miserable if they're not attentive. So they can create all sorts of good things, but the byproducts are bad things unless they are really thoughtful.
Mm-hmm. There's this question that comes up all the time. I don't know if it's the innovator's dilemma or not, but I mean, I wanted to ask you this because I can't ever wrap my head around how this happens. But there's this question that pops up, like Blockbuster could have bought Netflix, and then they didn't. I think they turned them down a few times. Kodak invents the digital camera and then does nothing with it, or actually shuts it down. Like, how? I mean, you're talking about, like, companies and sort of the potential of companies and the longevity of companies. How do they save themselves from their own demise, from their own death, so to speak?
Yeah. No, I mean, it does go back to the innovator's dilemma and now the late, great Clay Christensen, one of the most wonderful men I've ever met, people I've ever met. I mean, I guess what I think that can save companies from that is to have a relentless focus on the customer. Right? If you have that relentless focus on the customer, you will not let kind of annoying things get in your way, right? And so to a certain extent, if you go back to Kodak, digital cameras were an annoyance to their business model. Their business model was to make money selling film. Full stop, right? And so the digital camera needed no film. Oops. Is that ever irritating? Kind of all our film factories and our film distribution and the profits we make from film, all could go away. And so they'd rather say, we'll favor the taking care of the annoyance, which is shelve this idea, versus, but no, consumers want this. They will want this. This just is better. And if you have that dedication, you will kind of obsolete yourself. And I'm a good friend with A.G. Lafley because we worked together for forever. One of the moves that caused his career to really kind of shoot up was a situation exactly like that, right? Where he just said, this is annoying, but if we don't do it, somebody else will. And so he observed and this was in the early 90s, that Japanese detergents were compact. So you guys are too young to remember this, but in the good old days, detergents were big and fluffy. They came in these really big boxes of Tide. And in fact, it's because people liked fluffy detergent. And in American houses, this is stereotypical, but American houses in apartments are way bigger than Japanese houses and apartments. And so there was no negative to having big fluffy detergent. And so to make big fluffy detergent, you had to pump this detergent into these big towers that fluffed it up. So they were these towers and that was part of the process of making detergent. Japanese, no, small homes, small kind of stores, small everything. And so you make the detergent as compact as possible. And AG observed that in Japan and said, you know what, compact detergent is better for everybody. Like, you may have a big house, but if you use less in your cupboard and in that shopping cart, it's a littler box, and on the shelf it's a littler box, which is better for the retailers. And and Lion and Cow, the big Japanese consumer products companies, are getting more internationally interested and oriented. If they came here, bad things might happen. They could steal a march on us. And so he went ahead and took a huge risk, because the consumers weren't saying we want compact detergent, right?
Right.
Because they didn't even know what it was. And they were used to what they were now. So the consumer research wasn't overwhelmingly positive, but he just said, I'm going to do this. And he made a bet. And he said the bet he made was a fireable offense. He said, if it wouldn't have worked, I probably would have gotten fired. It worked. It absolutely shot P&G kind of ahead. It actually helped eliminate Unilever from the market. They gave up. And of course, the Japanese, have you ever seen a Japanese detergent in North America? No, they had no angle that they could take to get in. So it can be done. But what was AG's focus on? And they had to write off, I think it was $750 million of detergent producing assets.
Wow.
So what was his focus on? The irritation of writing off hundreds of millions of dollars of assets, or what would customers really prefer? Answer: what would customers really prefer? No disruption, and the rest is history. He becomes a CEO, makes P&G even more consumer focused. All of that. So, I've always said about Clay, and I used to have conversation with Clay. I said, this is disruption is not an equal opportunity event. It's not as though disruptors kind of randomly have a roulette wheel with 32 industries on it and say, wherever the ball goes, we're going to disrupt that industry. They go at industries that are not listening to customers. Right?
Yeah.
That's why. Where's the the greatest disruption kind of happening these days? Fintech, right? The financial services companies. How many of them are really oriented towards you, the customer? Do you feel like really warm and fuzzy about your financial services? Ed tech, education it serves itself, not its customers. Med tech, right? So it's not equal opportunity. I don't know if you guys remember a product called the Club. So this was a big red bar. It still exists that you attach to your steering wheel so they can't steal your car, right?
Right.
And it's really visible so that the car thief sees the Club and says, "Oh, well, even if I break in and I can start this, I cannot turn it." And I've always argued the Club does not decrease car theft. And people say, no, but they have the statistics that show if you buy the Club, you're going to have your car less likely to be stolen. And I said, yes, but it doesn't reduce car theft. It rearranges car theft. People steal different cars than they would otherwise steal, but they're going to steal car thieves are going to find a car to steal, and it's going to be one without the Club on it. Same with disruption, right? You can make sure they disrupt somebody else by relentlessly paying attention to the consumer, even when it is painful. And in that case, it was painful. Big write-offs, big risk, but I'm going to do it because my core thesis is you must serve the consumer, the customer, and put their interests first.
And V, feel free to jump in anywhere here, but there's this, like, I appreciate that. And there's so much, like, I don't know if you're familiar on the marketing space, like the short and long. There's Les Binet and Peter Field. They've done a lot of work on the obsession with short-term marketing focus and versus long-term brand building kind of thing. And I equate that idea to a lot of like the idea between shareholder and stakeholder, maximizing shareholder versus stakeholder value. Because it seems to me like that's a very understandable solution to a problem if you look at maximizing stakeholder value. which is everyone wins over a long period of time. But if it's obsessing about shareholder value, which is I need to deliver a return today or this week or this quarter or whatever the number is, you get this short-term obsession, which then prevents you from looking at things like Japan. Like, what are they doing over there? What are our risks? Because that's a longer-term play. So is there, how hard is it for companies to make that shift? Because it sounds like AJ is a pretty remarkable person that he was able to make that shift.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think he made any shift, actually. That's just who he was. So he didn't have to shift. But I mean, where do I start? Like shareholder, I think people who think shareholder value maximization should be your goal are the same people who don't know where babies come from. Right? They think the stork drops them down the chimney. They're fully formed, and the stork drops them down the chimney. They're the same people exactly. Right? So they don't understand that babies are an outcome that's part of a process. Right. And you can't sort of say kind of, I want babies, and not do a bunch of things that are required to create one and grow one, right? So shareholder value is an output, right? And it's not something that you can directly get. You can't say, I'm going to get more shareholder value by declaring that I want more shareholder value. Yeah. That's a good idea, huh? Just like I'm going to call the stork agency and have them drop off a few more babies because I want a lot of them. It's just a fundamental kind of stupidity, like a nonsensical nature. So what you got to focus on, if you care about shareholder value, is stuff that you do, right, that would lead to this output of shareholder value being high. And A.G. Lafley's kind of view of that would be, well, let's see, you focus on delivering super value to the consumer, you take care of your trade channel partners and be the best company they want to deal with, you keep your costs enough in line, you spend more than anybody else on branding and innovation, and you know what will happen? Your stock price will go up, right? That's like, he knows where babies come from,
right? Where do
so, and anybody can do it. You just, and I think, and I tell this to people who are fascinated with shareholder value maximization. I just say, well, think about babies. They're not an input.
This is fascinating. And I'm going to go a little in a different direction here, because I think the issue sometimes, I'd love your take on this, Roger, but when organizations are setting themselves up, when you're looking at either how they set themselves up in terms of hierarchies that are established, it feels like organizations actually get in the way of their own ability to be disruptors by focusing on that short term. So in your opinion, is it because we're putting the cart before the horse, or is it vice versa? Or is it just because we sometimes there's legacy that lives in organizations that don't allow them to pivot as quickly as they may need to establish, a different product, something different in the market? Where do organizations get in their own way?
Well, broadly speaking, there's been this tendency or drift in management over the last 50, 60 years. It actually started in earnest with Carnegie Foundation and Ford Foundation studies of business education in 1959-60. And they studied business education. They put economists in charge of the studies, and they both published a study saying business education sucks. It's a bunch of ex-executives in the classroom telling war stories. It's not sufficiently scientific. And the business world, ever since, they were very chastened by this. They said, "Oh, you've got to be kind of scientific." So they've got refereed journals, and people needed to have PhDs to teach, and business became ever more quantitative. Not unlike much of the rest of the world, but it really went because they were stung by these reports from two of the most important, charitable foundations who worked in education in America. And so the reason for a lot of this, what appears to you as short-termism, right? So it manifests itself. It appears to the world as short-termism, is a result of an analytical fallacy, right? So what MBAs learn and BComs learn now is that the only decision that's a legitimate decision is one that is fact-based and analytically sound. Am I correct? Is that not what you guys are that's what you're taught?
100%.
You're some kind of corporate floozy if you actually say, no, I'm not going to go with the data. Am I correct? Right? It's 100%, right? That there is no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Floozies do something other than it, and real business people, real business men and business women who are legitimate will only make decisions based on the analysis. Okay. Now, here's the slight problem. Okay, we've got a slight problem here. One. Last time I checked, you can tell me otherwise, V or Mark, there is no data about the future.
Fair.
Right. Okay. So if you're performing an analysis, right? So you're right now, you're absolutely right now in this moment, and you're performing an analysis. From what era is all the data for that analysis?
Past.
Yep. 100%. It has to be. It's tautological. It can't be otherwise. It has to be 100%. You could say, no, it's current. No. You're doing the analysis of it now, so it happened already. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly be analyzing it, right? Okay. Now let's go to your statistics course. What did you learn in your statistics course about the sample, the nature of the sample that you need to use to make a valid inference about the universe from which you've sampled? What characteristic does that sample have to have?
I'm not sure. I would want to say it has to be representative of the group.
Thank you. You don't be so unconfident, Mark. Yeah. That is exactly the correct answer. You are taught in Statistics 101 that the singular important part of attribute of your sample is it must be representative. If it's not representative, if you're trying to figure out what do people think and you interview only men, it's unrepresentative. If people think and you only interview 12-year-olds, no, it'll be unrepresentative. And so, and what do they tell you? They tell you it is fundamentally dangerous to draw inferences about a universe from an unrepresentative sample. Okay? So, whatever analysis we've done is on data drawn from the past. What is our fundamental assumption about the future that we would be necessary for us to make to utilize that data to draw an inference as to what we should do? We're making a fundamental assumption about the future so that it doesn't violate, Mark, the representativeness criteria that you did. We are assuming that the future will be identical to the past.
Yeah.
Am I not correct?
Yep.
Like just put together your decision-making courses and your statistics courses. That has to be the case. Otherwise, we are making a horrible analytical error of the sort that your statistics professor warned you against repeatedly. Meanwhile, your marketing professor told you have to make kind of database decisions, right? So there's a fundamental schism in all business education between what your finance professor, market professor, and your statistics professor teach you, unless, of course, all those other professors are correct that the future is identical to the past, and that's kind of the way things have worked out, right? Nothing has ever changed in any business. There is no disruption. There are no new products. There are no new trends, right? Mm-hmm. Duh, right? Like, this is the stupidest idea possible. Now, was this my idea? No, I wish it were, this critique, but it wasn't. This is the critique of the guy who invented data analytics. Now, the guy who invented data analytics is named Aristotle. You'd be happy to know he's a Greek guy, 2,500 years ago, and the greatest scientists who've ever walked the planet, one of the most influential thinkers broadly. But he invented science. One of the things Aristotle did was create a system, and it's in the most important book in the history of science called Analytica Posterior Analytics. It said, okay, here's how you determine the cause of a given effect. That's what he was interested in. You go and analyze data and determine that this causes that. Ta-da! That's exactly what all of you guys were taught in all of your business course. Analyze this to determine the cause so that you can make a data-based decision. And he invented that. Now, and anybody who learns anything about the history of science reads Analytica Posterior and is taught this, but they are not taught, and this is not taught anywhere in the world, that Aristotle issued a warning. He said, by the way, this methodology is for the part of the world where things cannot be other than they are. Wonderful, right? So what is he referring to? He's referring to, like, if I have this pen in my hand and I let go of it, it'll drop. It dropped last week. It dropped 100 years ago. It's going to drop next week. It's going to drop in Antarctica. It's going to drop in Denmark. It's going to drop in Florida. It's going to drop everywhere. It's part of the world where things cannot be other than they are, right? And he said, but there's another part of the world. And he called that part of the world the part of the world where things can be other than they are. And the example I always use on that is this, right? This smartphone. How many of these were in existence in 1999? Zero, because the BlackBerry was the first one in 2000. How many are there now? $4.4 billion at last. $4.4 billion. 4.4 billion of them at last count. I believe that's part of the world where things are different and are continuing to be different than they are. And you know what he said in that part of the world? Do not use my method. So the father of science, he didn't say, you got to modify it slightly in this way. Do not use that method. That's been ignored. All business education completely ignores the father of data analytics and his advice. What did he say? He said, in that part of the world, you must imagine possibilities and choose the one for which the most compelling argument can be made. Right? Not for which there's the most compelling data. He said it's an argument. It's a possibility with an argument. It's a hypothesis. It's a thesis about what might be. And he said the job of humans in that part of the world is to be the cause of the effect they want to see. Rather than determine the cause of the effects that we do see, it's be the cause of the effects. This is a long answer, but it's a long and important answer to your short question, which is the reason why we have so much short-termism, right, is that people are taught to analyze the past. And when they analyze the past, what do they think is going to happen? The same thing that's always happened, even though they don't explicitly recognize that. Their analysis tells them nothing is going to change. And then when they say, but I got this feeling that things are about to change, what are they told? Shut up and get back to your desk and do some analysis. Come back when you can prove it. So the thing that destroys innovation, I've always said that the thing that destroys innovation is just two words: prove and it. It is a useful word that can be used in many contexts and it's not damaging. But if you put it after prove, you've screwed yourself. You cannot invent anything in the future. So that's why we don't have people, quote, thinking long term. It isn't a long term, short term thing as much as it is they are driven by analysis, and analysis drives them to think that we shouldn't do anything new and different, and nothing is really going to change. And even when they see some change coming, right, they sort of kind of are saying, well, but that's bad. I don't have the data to prove that, so nobody's going to listen to me, so I won't be able to do it. So let's just keep doing what we're doing. So it's very fundamental, and unfortunately, the entire business school apparatus is unfortunately teaching people basically to be largely incompetent for the world.
Roger, I just want to check on your timing. We didn't clarify that at the beginning. Are we?
Well, go as long as you want.
The hour?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's such an interesting point because I mean, V and I being in marketing, we see it all the time. Like on the marketing side of things, where you've got campaigns are running, everybody wants to see the proof right now. Like, show me the ROAS, show me the return on the investment, and then things like long-termism. It's not even from a structural point of view of an organization, but just in terms of
and they get what they deserve. They get what they deserve, market which is decline into nothingness. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's all. Fortunately, this is all works out the way it should. Right. They're being kind of completely logically inconsistent, and they're getting the just rewards for that, which is they will decline into nothingness. But on the way to declining into nothingness, it'll feel good.
Yeah, because there's an assurance that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. And
we can't prove it otherwise.
Right. And when the business goes south, they will pull out all their reports and all their analyses and says, nobody could have ever imagined this. We were doing the right thing. We were doing exactly what we learned in our marketing class in MBA. See, here's all the analyses. And so you shouldn't fire me. This is just random chance events. Events, what we learned, it's at 95% confidence interval. And so it's that 5% happening to it. But did you want us to bet on the 5%? No, blah, blah, blah. It's all this. It's just, you can make this ex post rationalization of why you did the right thing. But it's just, the entire world of business for the last 60 years has been taught a flawed kind of model of decision making, full stop. And it's getting worse, right? What is the hottest topic in business today?
Data science, probably.
Data science, absolutely. What is there a huge shortage of? Data scientists. If you could go become a data scientist, even if you don't know anything about it, just call yourself one. You can get a fantastic job at a fantastic salary and crunch numbers, and you have no responsibility for anything because you're assumed to be correct, right? And if things work out in a different way, you just say, well, I crunched the numbers, so it's great. Like, you guys should become data scientists. Just call yourself that. You don't have to be good at anything. You just call yourself that.
I love it.
So let's imagine then, like, we're working at a company and we go, okay, well, let's not just live in the past. Let's not just look at the data in the past, but let's look at the future and figure out a new plan. I mean, there's lots of different probabilities and possibilities that I'm sure exist. And at some point, you're going to be making a choice on which path to go down.
Yeah.
Is there, and I know you've written also tons of stuff about decision-making and the opposable mind and integrative thinking. What are some of the ways that you can, and one of the things I've heard you say in the past. You have to fall in love with ideas, and especially ones that aren't your own, which I recently found is really a funny experience for me, because I'm like, instantly I just went to this thing where I was like, that's not right, that's not going to work, and then I was like, but my idea is amazing. Like,
yes.
What am I doing?
Yes.
Like, I've been preparing for this interview with you, and I'm like, I just did the exact opposite of what I knew I should be doing. But like, what is it that's so hard?
You're taught that too in business school, by the way. You taught that in business school too. Do the analysis to come to the right answer, and then you have to get buy into your right answer. So once again, business school is helping us be ineffective. So but what do you do? How do you get by? So it's to separate out two things. So generally speaking, I would argue that you're taught that analysis is a thing. And I'd say, no, you need to tease it apart into two things, because it is two things that are stuck together and called a name, analysis. One part of it is a logical structure, and then the other part is data that we add to the logical structure. So if we had a logic that says, I think the bigger the factory, the more you can spread its fixed costs, so the lower the unit cost of the output. Right. That's a logical structure. We have a logic, a reason for thinking that big plants are going to be more cost effective than small plants. Right. Now, if we want to then go test that, we would add data to it. We'd go and look at our 100 plants and chart them and see if there a downward slope. If we put size, right, of plant on the x-axis and cost per unit of the output on the y-axis, if that's a downward slope, we say the analysis showed that our hypothesis was correct, right? So when you don't have any data, people generally kind of say there is no way to do analysis, and so we have to abandon that. At this point, it's just gut feel, right? Am I right? Like, that's what people do. They say you can't do anything sort of rigorous. But I say, yes, you can. You can think through the logic, right? You can say, here's my logic, AG. Here's my logic. Big Japanese CPGs, they do it this way. You know what? If people got used to that, they'd realize it's better, even though they're used to something else now. And if we don't do it, they could come. Right? That's a logical structure. He's got a whole bunch of logic around that. And essentially, in things about the future, and this is what Aristotle said, you must imagine possibilities, right? And AG imagined a possibility of, hey, we could do that to prevent them from ever having an opportunity to do that. And then choose the one for which the most compelling argument can be made. So what he imagined, what Aristotle imagined, is there's a competition of alternative logics. And the way you're going to have to do it is figure out, by having those alternative logics compete with one another, which is the most compelling story, free of kind of analytical data. Now, does this mean that there is no data whatsoever? I would say no, right? Most things have little snippets of data. It's often analogy, right? So when Johnny Ive created the colors of the iMac, right? All those tangerine and grape and all of those. Where did those colors come from? Why did he think people would like those colors? Well, he copied exactly the Pantones that a camera in the 1960s, a little camera came out with all sorts of colors, and he copied them exactly. And he said, well, cameras and computers aren't all that dissimilar. All cameras in those days were dark brown and black. And this company came up with this camera that's all multicolored, and it did really well. Computers are all sort of gray, brown, beige.
Right.
We could do that too. So it wasn't as though there's no data points whatsoever, but is that statistically significant data? Right. Another field, 30 years ago, one time it happened. No, it's not. It's not compelling analytical data, but it gives you snippets and clues that enable you to build that logical argument, and it helps you be compelling. And in fact, analogy is one of the most useful. Aristotle said a metaphor is one of the greatest thinking capabilities. And this is why in Silicon Valley, when you're pitching any idea, we're going to be the Warby Parker of this, we're going to be the Uber of that, right? It's bet on us because it's kind of like that. And so that's what you have to do. You have to get good at what I'd say to the two of you is you have to get good at making the logic of your ideas explicit, and then being able to argue without data for your ideas. And if you insist on arguing with data for your ideas, it'll all be drab, boring, and dull.
Right.
And you will be disrupted.
Yeah.
But it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah.
Am I destroying all your conceptions of business here?
No, not at all. I mean, it's funny because, I mean, I've always had like sort of bipolar personality in a sense that
I see. Bipolar, okay, so this is therapy here.
Yeah, but like I've had, I've spent half my career in sales and half in marketing, and then for a long time I thought I was going to be a photographer, and then for a while I thought I was going to be a doctor. So like I've had these like opposing. I don't know, personality disorders, let's call it, about things. And so I've, in my mind, I've like, this stuff makes a lot of sense, which I think is partly why I'm so drawn to your work. But I see this stuff in business and I keep thinking, well, I have to prove it, or if it just make it more efficient, not more effective, or more of the same, just ramp it up a bit more. We need more faster, sooner, quicker. And so some of this stuff that you're talking about, is that leap of faith, is that leap of logic, with like snippets that sort of allow you to illuminate, put a flashlight in some of the dark corners.
Yeah.
And it's really reassuring to hear that, actually, for me.
Oh, good. I mean, it's sort of, I'm sort of semi-famous for playing to win, right? And, where to play, how to win.
Yeah.
You need to apply that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Where are you going to play and how are you going to win? And one way where to play is where everybody else is playing, and you're going to win by obeying all the rules that are in place, even if they're stupid. I have this fascination now. I don't know if you like puerile movies, but Galaxy Quest, with Sigourney Weaver.
I haven't seen it. I know the one you're talking about. I've heard it's amazing.
It's funny as hell. And so Sigourney Weaver, this is a Star Trek spoof, and she plays this role where her role on this starship is to repeat what the computer says. So there's this computer who's all knowing, and she's the only one that the computer will listen to the questions of. So you have to give Sigourney Weaver your question, and she'll ask the computer, and then she'll repeat what the computer says. And in this particularly tense moment in this one scene, her fellow crew member said, "This is so irritating. We're all here. We can all hear the computer." And Sigourney Weaver, because it's a comedy, it's so hilarious. She turns, and she's such a great comedic actor. She turns to him and says, "I got one job on this ship. It's a stupid job, but I'm going to do it." And that is a metaphor for much of business. I know my job is stupid, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well. And so you can obey all the rules and do analysis and make all your decisions fact-based and analytical, and be just another drone. And that's your where to play, how to win. and you're going to do it really well, and you're going to become a data scientist and do like crazy. Or you can choose. You can say, where am I going to play? I'm going to play in a different place. I'm going to play in the world of new ideas. And how am I going to win? I'm going to get great at building logical arguments that utilize little snippets of data here, metaphors, etc., to be able to be convincing with my arguments. It's just who you want to be. Now, that is a tougher row to hoe for sure. But people, I mean, people ask me, like, young people particularly ask me, well, geez, you're sort of successful. How do I like, how did you do that? I did it exclusively that way. When I went to the Rotman School and said, we're going to turn around the Rotman School and we're going to do all these things. I mean, the general view was the guy's a bit nuts because he's got no data to prove any of that. And we did it all and more than anybody expected, but all of it, none of it was strictly database. Did I ignore the data that I was available? No, but mainly and the same thing I did at Monitor, the same thing I do with all my consulting. It's just like, so that's my where to play how to win, is just be different. And my new book, we should have mentioned that, because all this stuff about Aristotle's in it. It's called A New Way to Think. It's coming out in April, cool. And it's a book that is 14 different chapters on here's the dominant model in business today in this subject. Here's how business thinks about talent. Here's how business thinks about M&A. Here's how business kind of thinks about data analytics. Here's how it's flawed, and here's a new way to think. And I'm being explicit about 14 areas of business where we are using a way of thinking, a framework for thinking that is fundamentally flawed. It's going to give us bad results, but we're using it anyway because it's what we're taught.
Well, I mean, I have a million questions about all those. I'd love to dig into that. But there is, and I do want to get into the playing to win, because there's so much richness in there. Like, even just yesterday, I was putting it in part of my presentation for one of my clients. But so doing things that don't make sense, and just because that's the way things are. Like, I noticed in playing to win, you don't have SWOTs anywhere there.
Yes, well,
I suppose
I don't like dumb ideas. You see, and I am despite this kind of distaste for predicting the future, I'm an empiricist, and I've been now at it for 40 years. And I've seen many SWOT analyses, and I've never gotten any utility from any of them. And so I've started asking this question when I'm giving talks. I say, who here can tell me about the time that they read a SWOT analysis or performed one and came to a blinding insight? And thus far, nobody has put up their hand. So I'm empirical enough to say, after 40 years and you haven't seen something, chances are you never will. But you have to have a theory then. Why, why might that be? And for me, the reason is, you only know if something is a strength or a weakness when you know what your strategy choice is. Yeah. You only know what's an opportunity or a threat when you know what your strategy is. So if you do an analysis that's about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you have to think of anything and everything. You go either one direction or another. You have already a predetermined notion of what your strategy is, in which case you can do a good SWOT. But then why even bother doing strategy? Just say, this is going to be our strategy. And so these are the strengths and weaknesses associated with that. Or everything could possibly be a strength. Everything could possibly be a weakness. Everything could possibly be an opportunity. Everything could possibly be a threat. And so you do an analysis that is essentially an inch deep and a mile wide. that is what SWOTs are. So what I say is wait to do analysis. In Playing to Win, I describe this strategic choice structuring process. Wait until you have come up with a possibility, of reverse engineered it to say what would have to be true for this to be a good idea. Figure out what of those things you're most worried about, and then analyze the hell out of that. Right? Analyze the hell out of that. Then you can be an inch wide and a mile deep on something that really matters. So SWOTs are completely, utterly useless. Although it's not entirely. So I don't know if either of you have children, but, we have this tradition of when they cry, we put a thing in their mouth, right? Pacifier. Mm-hmm. So the pacifier actually doesn't do anything, like it doesn't feed them but it seems to comfort them. So SWOT is a pacifier, right? So you stick it in their mouth, and they feel comforted by the fact they've done a SWOT. So I guess that's got that utility. It's sort of a extremely shallow utility, but if it makes them feel better, go ahead and waste hundreds and thousands of person hours on doing something completely that has no value to the development of your strategy, but it makes them feel good because they have a thick deck full of stuff, and they say, listen, this is my SWOT analysis. This is my 10th SWOT analysis, and so I can check that box on my resume. I do SWOT analysis. Yes. I'm just not into that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's so timely because so I'm actually doing my marketing class right now.
Okay.
And we have this hypothetical case study.
Yes.
And we're going through the 4 Ps. We're going through, doing the SWOT analysis on this hypothetical. And I'm sitting there and I'm struggling with it because there's one of those things where in business today, I don't actually remember the last time I actually did a SWOT analysis, because you're right. It has to come from a strategy first that you've already firmed up, and hey, this is the direction I'm going. Yeah. Now let's build out all the data and all the analysis around.
Or these are two of the two directions that I'm deciding between, right?
Exactly.
That would be the other one. Yeah. So exactly. I think you just have to channel, Vaz, your inner Sigourney Weaver, and you just got to suck it up. And to get an A, this is a stupid job, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a great SWOT. It's going to have many pages and much analysis, and then the marketing professor will give me an A. So Sigourney Weaver, go watch Galaxy Quest tonight.
I'm going to watch that.
And just suck up. It's hilarious. It is. It couldn't be funnier.
So the only thing I wanted to ask is, why do we accept tools like this then in place of strategy? Well, why are we just okay with doing it when there's fundamentally, errors in this way of approaching the whole strategic thing? And instead of doing that analysis up front to get to understanding that, why don't you just say, let's do it?
Stupid ass things last for long periods of time, right? It's, when something gets sort of cognitive domination, right? It's like, then it lasts for a long time, right? Romans, had water pipes made of lead for a long time until they all started dying. But they had no idea that they were dying because this was the upper crust, lead, right? Poisoning. Who had the running water of lead poisoning. So there are a lot of things that are bad for us that we just keep doing because it's hard to get the data. Like it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard for people to say we're being disrupted because of the analytical methodologies we use to make decisions. That's I don't know if you've ever read, Peter Senge wrote a really good book called The Fifth Discipline a long while ago. And where he was one of the first to sort of popularize sort of system dynamics. I mean, he learned it from the people, John Sterman and Forrester at MIT. He was at MIT, but he popularized it. And I always remember when I first read The Fifth Discipline, he had this nice, simple sort of way of describing it. He said complexity occurs when there is distance between cause and effect, right? And so whenever there's kind of great distance between cause and effect, we've adopted this analytical thing that we thought was an awesome thing that is making us great instead of floozies. And if you play that through all these loops, it ends up with us deciding to be disrupted by somebody else. It's just a hard, long, logical train to get there. And that's why a lot of these really dumb ideas last for a long time, right? And shareholder value maximization is a dumb idea, and Jack Welch finally said that like 20 years after he sort of adopted it as his credo, and he called it the stupidest idea in the world 20 years after he said it was the be all and end all. So these things take a long time. And this is the other respect. I mean, I may be, kind of delusions of grandeur here, but, I have sort of dedicated my life to trying to be like Peter Drucker. And basically what Peter Drucker did was repeatedly through his career said something at time t equals 0 that everybody said at the time, you're nuts. And then 25 years later, people said,
wait a second.
Wait a second. He was absolutely right. Like 1976 pension fund revolution, pension funds are going to save capitalism by having workers own the means of production through their pension fund. Oh, how silly that is. 25 years later, pension funds are the biggest providers of equity capital, and the workers actually own the means of production through their pension fund. So my take on all of this is I got to say things. Time t equals 0, and 25 years later, they're going to be adopted. And when I went on my first NYSE traded public company and got to the first board meeting in 1999, I said, why the hell are we giving guidance? Right? This is stupid. Right? Everything about it is stupid. We're giving guidance about something we don't understand. That this sets up crazy expectations. Then this guidance game goes on. It's like stupid. Well, Roger, you stupid young person, was basically the tone of the chair of the board. Bob Crandall, the longtime CEO of American Airlines, was the chair of the board. Well, you stupid young person. Everybody gives guidance, quarterly profit guidance. Everybody does. That's just the way it is, Roger, and it'll never be different. Well, that guidance has been dropping like flies, right? It hasn't gone away completely, but it's 23 years later. So I only get vindicated a quarter of a century after saying anything. And I've been saying, I don't know, I'm being vindicated on talent. I wrote an article 20 years ago on the rise of talent. Now it's clear as a bell. At the time, it was like, what's he talking about? And same on design. I finally wrote the Aristotle article with my friend Tony Goldsby-Smith. I don't know. I think that was 14 or 15, and it'll be another 20 years. So I've just now come to the conclusion that I have to wait 25 years.
And you're at peace with
acceptance.
I am. Yeah, I am. Well, I mean, it's just hard for people to drop models that they're so comfortable with, and like all of your professors, right? They're good people and smart as hell. And if you say to them, you know what, you have to recast everything you're teaching to take into account that when you ask people to analyze the past, that's a deeply flawed sample that violates all principles of statistics. And you should tell them to do something other than that. They're like, whoa, like, what do I tell them then? Like my notes, all the cases I use, all the material, all the tests it's all, you got to analyze this, you got to analyze that, you got to come to this conclusion. It's a horrifying prospect, because literally, if the business school world simply accepted what the guy who gave them data analysis said about the limits of data analysis, they'd have to throw out at least half the curriculum, at least, and maybe more, like 80%.
I'm telling my instructor, SWOT is a pacifier. That is I absolutely love it.
But Roger, you'll get a D. That's the trouble. No, I mean, I'm sort of being serious about it. That is the challenge. Is that Anyway, you guys, given your interest in this, if you haven't read it, you should read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. As he points out that what happens is that in any branch of kind of human study, you hone in on in due course a dominant theory. So there's a battle that ensues for theory, and a dominant theory always emerges. And then anybody involved in that field is pressured indoctrinated in the dominant theory. Right. And then what inevitably happens, because it's never kind of, no theory is like perfectly right, is anomalies are seen, right? That just don't fit the theory. It's like, ooh, what's that? Right. The theory says that shouldn't exist. It does. Those anomalies get dismissed. People who try to sort of look at those anomalies get ostracized, etc. But when the anomalies occur enough and enough and enough, right, then somebody builds a theory around that anomaly, and in due course, that builds enough strength that there's a scientific revolution, right? He said, most normal science, calls it normal science. It's slow, tiny incremental builds on strategy and everybody focusing on it. Then you get these periods of revolution where there's a new one. And you guys, given your interests, would probably find that just an interesting book to read, because it will help you understand more why stupid theories last as long as they do, and why they crumble. They're like dictators, right? Right. Gaddafi's in charge for a long period of time, and then it all falls apart, and they go and shoot him, right? So it's a revolution with an abrupt kind of end, and that's and that's how life works. And I study anomalies, right, and I come up with new theories. That's what I do in life. I've done it in a whole bunch of ranges, and I'll give myself credit. I eat my own dog food, so when I go and run something, I run it that way. Same with Tennis Canada, right? So when I was at Tennis Canada, we came up with a revolutionary way to develop tennis players, and now all the world, instead of saying Canada has no tennis players, is irrelevant, says, what the hell is Canada doing that gets them Felix Auger-Aliassime, Denis Shapovalov, Leila Fernandez, I didn't know you were Bianca Andreescu involved. I was more than involved. There was a group of four of us who did the transformational strategy for Tennis Canada in 2005. All which we did tennis development in a fundamentally different way than anybody else in the world, and went from being irrelevant to the apple of everybody's eye at this point. That was utterly, completely, absolutely by strategic design. I wrote an article about it if you want to read it.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't. Yeah. I didn't.
And it's funny because the transformation of strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought it was the maple syrup.
Well, Leila Fernandez says so, but wasn't that you?
Right. Yeah. Actually, so and we're running a bit over what we had planned, but if you don't mind, if you can, in the next little bit, I'd love to just kind of, there's so much stuff that I would love to ask you about. I mean, there's stuff about the Good Job Institute. There's the stuff about the Martin Prosperity Institute. There's stuff about strategy being left to senior execs. I mean, we haven't even touched on Playing to Win, which I think is an incredible model. And it's also aging nicely, I would say, based on your idea of, that's about 10 years-ish. So maybe it's got another 15 to go.
Yeah. It's 9 years.
Like there's, and if maybe this is a nice segue, if there's any way to kind of talk about the Playing to Win model, maybe with Tennis Canada as an example. Sure. I know it's like the idea of it is problem solving. Strategy in itself, I think, is a lot about problem solving and then making choices. And so maybe you can illuminate the model using Tennis Canada.
Sure. So if you go back to Tennis Canada 2005, we hadn't had a top 50 male singles player in 30 years or 20 years or 25 years. We'd never had a top 10 male singles player. Female, the only one we had in the top 10 was Carling Bassett, whose father was a billionaire and who took her to Florida as a kid and developed her completely outside the Tennis Canada system. So, and we never went to Davis Cup, World Cup. We never had a Grand Slam singles semifinalist, let alone finalist, let alone winner. We were irrelevant. We had less than 500 12-month-a-year tennis courts in all of the country, because to be 12 months a year, they have to be in bubbled in the winter or in a fixed structure. Any run-of-the-mill county in Florida would have over 500 12-month-a-year tennis courts. And we had no tradition, no nothing, no infrastructure, no money. We were in debt from having just built the new stadium, because the ATP, the men's tour, was threatening to pull our tournament because our facility sucked so bad. So we built the York one, which is a nice facility, and we upgraded the Montreal one. So we looked at the tennis world, and this combines playing to win and integrative thinking. We looked at so we said we suck on all dimensions, and we want to be a leading tennis nation. So we looked at the models for being a leading tennis nation, and we looked at the two most successful models, actually, of the previous 30 or so years. One model was Russia, and we knew we couldn't follow that model, which is to be a poor, pathetic country where everybody leaves as a child to Florida. So that wasn't going to work, because all sorts of Russian players are great, but none of them became great in Russia. They just became great because they needed to get out of Russia. The two successful ones were France and the U.S. France had an extraordinarily regimented system where you went into the French Federation system as a young person, and you trained in their junior tennis center, their senior tennis center. You by French coaches. They and anybody outside that system couldn't make it because they got zero support, and you were in it. America, not surprisingly, was let a thousand flowers bloom, and once somebody gets to be really good, we'll shower them with millions of dollars of coaching support. We'll give them Brad Gilbert $4 million a year to coach them. Right. So we said those are the two models. We're a small country without a tennis tradition. We can't let 1,000 flowers bloom because there'll be 5 flowers blooming, and that won't work. But we can't be as regimented as the French system. The French system can be that regimented because it's got this tradition of doing that. If we said to tennis players, you have to do it exactly precisely the way we say in centers that don't exist now, we'll get nobody to come. So those won't work. But how's about we take the best of those two approaches and create a hybrid approach? So we'll say you can develop anywhere you want, but we'll set the standards by which you have to achieve. So you got to get to this body fat. You can do it and we built a tennis center like the French. We snitched the head of their junior development program, Louis Borfiga, and we said we're going to have a tennis center. You can come, but if you want to develop where you want to develop or with somebody else, you got to. But we will set the output standards, not the inputs. The input in France is you got to come. We set the outputs, and then we did this brilliant thing, which was we hired as our high performance consultant and the guy who was going to run our under 12 program, Bob Brett, who was famous for having been the coach of Boris Becker. He coached Boris Becker to champion Goran Ivanisevic, all these other. He was considered one of the top 3 coaches in the world. And we said, you're going to be ahead of our under 12 program. Something he'd never done before in his life. He thought it was a really interesting, cool new thing to do, because we have so few tennis players. We got to identify the ones that truly could be a number 1 player in the world And the only person who's going to be able to do that is Bob Brett. So he traveled around Canada looking at kids and saying, that's got potential. That one's got potential. I remember when because I played tennis with him every time he was in Toronto at 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd talk for half an hour before hitting for an hour. And I remember when he first met Bianca Andreescu, and he said, has she got a head on her shoulders? She was like 8 at the time or something, but or maybe 9 or 10 at the time. He just knew. He just knew she had the intestinal fortitude to be a Grand Slam champion, which she was our first. So what we did was something that nobody else did. Took one of the finest coaches in the world, not just their finest, one of the finest 3 coaches in the world, and put them doing something that nobody else had them doing. And had this output-based, flexible system that got the best of American system and the best of the French system. And then on the business side, we turned around our tournaments to start making enough money to take up by 10x how much we spent on high performance. We stopped funding anybody at all unless they met our output standards. Right. And so we took money away from the existing players because they weren't training the way you need to train. We established how you need to train to be a champion. And sure enough, we produced first Milos and Eugenie, our first top 10 players ever, our first Grand Slam finalist ever. And now in behind them, this next group, and all the rest of the tennis world is like, how? Canada, how on earth did you do it? And they've all come and the US has come up and looked at our system and made modifications and the like. So that's it. We changed the strategy completely, complete unique strategy. There was no data to support that strategy. There just wasn't, but we prevailed. A group of 4 of us, the new CEO, the chair, Jack Graham, the guy who was going to be the next chair, Tony Ames, and me, who was going to be the chair after Tony Ames. So we had 9 straight years where we ruthlessly enforced the strategy. Nothing we did deviated 1 inch from the strategy. And we turned one of not the top 50 tennis nations in the world into a clear top 5 or 6 tennis nation in the world. Boom.
That's unbelievable. Yeah.
All doable. But most Canadian institutions just don't do that because, there's such great schism. Canadians do better in the global economy than Canadian institutions. There are Canadians dotted. A bunch of my CEO clients, kind of around the world, are Canadians. But if you put too many Canadians together, they dream small dreams. No, it's true. This is absolutely true. If you put too many Canadians together, they dream small dreams. If you separate out Canadians and put them with non-Canadians, they excel.
Wow,
that's fascinating.
There's so.
I got to go in a couple of minutes to another call, but you guys are fun. No. We can do this again. Hey, if you wanted to do another one of these closer to the launch of A New Way to Think in mid-April, we could do it and talk more about that. But
I'd love to. Yes. That'd be amazing.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. Let's do that.
Roger, I can't thank you enough.
You guys are fun.
And we try to be.
You are. You
succeed.
We
think we're a riot.
We think we're fun. We don't hear that very often, though.
No, you are. This is fun for me. That's why I don't generally sort of offer up, hey, I'll do another one in a few months. But you guys are fun. If you want to do another one, just give me an email, and we will follow up more on some of these themes because they lead so much into the theme of the book, and we could just talk through a few of the models. One is shareholder value. That's one chapter, and I give my argument. We've covered that, but we could do talent. We could do habits versus loyalty. There's lots of things we could do.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that. And in the meantime, we've got some reading to do.
Yes. I've assigned and viewing. But you have to watch Galaxy Quest. You will not regret.
It is on the list for sure. Roger, thanks so much for doing this. It's just been such an honor for me, and I really appreciate your time.
Not at all. My pleasure. You guys take care.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Roger.
And now, the post-pod discussion with V and Mark.
Times where, if you feel out of your league, you're like, yeah, of course it makes sense. But then it's Roger Martin telling you it makes sense, right? We're not crazy.
I love that part. We're not crazy.
We're not crazy.
I love that part. And especially that people called him crazy and told him he was stupid when he was I mean, that's encouraging.
That is encouraging. I think the biggest takeaway here, not only like SWOT is a pacifier, I freaking love that soundbite, because I think in this traditional like educational system, we're constantly forced to do things that may not make sense or we actually don't use in real life. But it's an institution, and it's because these processes have been baked in for so long. It just becomes binary in the way that we just accept it, or we choose to accept it.
NPS is one of those for me where I'm like, I really don't get it. I don't know everybody reports on it, so everyone like can compare, but I just really don't get the value of it. Galaxy Quest, that's a big takeaway for me.
I think I gotta go pop it up when new kid and everything. When I'm bottle feeding, I know what I'm watching now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I also like, for me, it's interesting hearing about his take on the structure of scientific revolutions, because you see that happen all the time, where like there's this, it's kind of what you were just talking about, right? Where there's this accepted belief that becomes reality, and unless it's challenged, it stays as the fact and truth, even though it may be completely wrong. He talked about the lead pipe. I've never heard about that one before, which is really fascinating. But there's things like bloodletting that was done forever, to people, and that really wasn't that good for anyone. So you just do some things sometimes, and I think it's a really interesting take that I got out of this was, continue to ask why. Like, why is that? Why do we do it like that? Why not consider something else? And we didn't really get into too much about falling in love with these other ideas, but I think that's a really interesting thing for me as I was doing the prep for this, was just trying to understand a different point of view and find the thing in it that is really useful first before just attacking it. It was really, that was a big one for me.
Well, he also said, which I absolutely loved, if you look at the state of business, it is a result of analytical fallacy, right? And I think that's something that when you think about the shortcomings of any organization is analysis by paralysis. Bring that data, and we empower our people to bring data to the table. And we have guiding principles in place that state, if you have the data to suggest or hypothesize something, you can basically bypass all hierarchy and just take that and run with it. But then, as marketers, we're becoming more data oriented than we've ever been, but we're losing some of that creativity that we're known for as marketing, right? Marketing wasn't always based on, if we go in, Don Draper and Mad Men, it's just like people in a room thinking and, something different, how to approach different scenarios, where now we've gone down, because of digital marketing, our ability to measure things a lot more than we've ever before, the pendulum's almost swung too much on the other side. We're waiting for the data to tell us what our next action should be. And it's
because
scary.
Then there's the proof. Yeah, then there's your proof going, see, that's what but then we're playing
look at my
to
CTR.
The platforms that are giving us the data, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he's so smart.
I'm just happy he offered himself that, he can come back on, not only for us, but like our listeners as well. I think there's a lot of stuff we can get into with Roger.